The Medici didn't just fund the Renaissance, they owned it. They controlled popes like puppets and turned French kings into their debtors. Yet their greatest secret wasn't in gold, but in something no one saw coming. To uncover it, we have to return to the place where the world looked away. From peasants to Europe's shadow bankers. The Medici started with nothing, dirt-poor farmers in the Tuscan countryside, long before they controlled popes and kings. The Medici family's rise from obscurity to Europe's financial overlords reads like an impossible fairy tale. But it's all true, and it happened faster than anyone thought possible. It started with Giovanni de' Medici in the early 1400s, a man who built his fortune from almost nothing. He understood that money wasn't just currency, it was power. While other families fought with swords, the Medici would conquer with coins. The family's breakthrough came when they mastered something similar to what we'd now call a strategy resembling modern insider trading. Essentially, they would buy assets before their own clients, then sell them at a profit. It sounds simple, but in medieval Europe, this was revolutionary. The Medici weren't just bankers, they were financial innovators who invented techniques still used on Wall Street today. By 1397, Giovanni de' Medici had established banks in Rome, Naples, Venice, and London. But here's the genius part. Each branch was run by trusted family members, creating an unbreakable family network that spanned the continent. When kings needed money for wars, they came to the Medici. When merchants needed credit for trade, they came to the Medici. And soon, even the church itself would come knocking. By the 1430s, Cosimo de' Medici was personally worth more than entire kingdoms. He could fund armies, topple governments, and make or break monarchs with a single decision. Behind the marble facades worked a machine. Couriers on horseback carried sealed rate sheets. Double-entry ledgers kept distant accounts in perfect balance, and bills of exchange moved money faster than armies. A merchant in Bruges could pay a Medici agent in wool, and a prince in Naples would receive gold on the same promise. No coins crossed borders, only trust in the Medici name. But the Medici understood something that other wealthy families missed. Money without protection was nothing, so they sought a power no army could defeat, one that kings themselves feared to challenge. And when they discovered that even monarchs bowed to a force greater than gold, they turned their eyes toward the church. Their influence began to reach beyond money, shaping how Europe thought, learned, and even prayed. Hidden power behind religion. Picture this. It's 1410, and Europe's most powerful institution, the Catholic Church, is in chaos. 3 different men claim to be the true pope. Wars rage across the continent. And in the middle of this religious crisis, a shrewd banker from Florence sees the opportunity of a lifetime. Giovanni de' Medici wasn't content with just lending money to merchants. He wanted something bigger, something that would make his family untouchable. So he made a bet that would change history forever. He decided to back a papal contender with gold and influence. The Medici patriarch chose his candidate carefully, Baldassare Cosa, a former pirate turned cardinal with ruthless ambition. Giovanni knew that whoever controlled the Vatican's finances would wield enormous influence over the church itself. So he opened his vaults and poured Medici gold into Cosa's campaign. Then the smoke cleared. Cosa emerged as John the 23rd. But here's the twist. The Medici family had just gained privileged access to the church's financial administration. Overnight, they transformed from regional bankers into one of the Vatican's most trusted financial partners. That's the kind of power the Medici had just begun to acquire. They didn't just fund the church, they owned part of its financial heartbeat. Giovanni de' Medici understood something that other bankers missed. In medieval Europe, there was no separation between church and state. Control the church's money, and you control kings, emperors, and entire nations. The Medici had just become Europe's shadow government. But this was only the beginning. The family's grip on papal finances would last for centuries, allowing them to influence papal elections, fund crusades, and turn religious faith into a durable machine of power. But power on that scale never comes without a price. And in Florence, the enemies of the Medici were sharpening their knives. Assassination and betrayal at the heart of power. By 1478, the Medici family had grown so powerful in Florence that their enemies were desperate. The rival Pazzi family, backed by agents connected to Pope Sixtus IV, hatched a plot so audacious it would make a Hollywood thriller seem tame. The plan was simple: murder the Medici brothers during Easter Sunday Mass, when the entire city would witness their downfall. Lorenzo de' Medici and his younger brother Giuliano knelt in prayer at Florence Cathedral, completely unaware that assassins lurked in the shadows. As the priest raised the communion host, the killers struck. Giuliano was stabbed 19 times, his blood pooling on the sacred marble floor. But Lorenzo was different. He fought back with the fury of a man who knew his family's empire hung in the balance. The Medici patriarch escaped with his life, but barely. A sword had sliced through his neck, missing his jugular by inches. As he stumbled to safety, Lorenzo made a promise that would echo through history. Anyone who betrayed the Medici family would pay with their lives. What happened next revealed the true extent of Medici power. Within hours, Lorenzo had turned the people of Florence into his personal army. The Pazzi conspirators were hunted down like animals. Some were hanged from the windows of government buildings. Others were dragged through the streets and torn apart by angry mobs. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't just revenge. It was a calculated demonstration of power. Lorenzo de' Medici used the assassination attempt to eliminate every rival family in Florence. In one bloody weekend, the Medici went from being the city's most powerful family to its absolute rulers. The message was clear: cross the Medici, and you don't just die. Your entire bloodline gets erased from history. This wasn't just banking anymore. This was medieval warfare disguised as business. From that day on, Florence wasn't ruled by democracy or divine right. It was ruled by fear. The puppet masters of the Renaissance. After surviving assassination and turning Florence into their fortress, the Medici didn't just rebuild. They reinvented power itself. They transformed culture into propaganda and turned beauty into control. Here's what art history books won't tell you. The Renaissance wasn't a spontaneous cultural awakening. It was the world's most expensive marketing campaign, funded and directed by the Medici family to glorify their dynasty. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent, turned Florence into his personal propaganda machine. When he discovered a teenage Michelangelo, he didn't just sponsor the boy's art. He moved him into the Medici palace and treated him like a son. Every masterpiece Michelangelo created was designed to showcase Medici power and sophistication. Think about it. From the David statue to the early works that inspired the Sistine Chapel and the Pietà, these weren't just art. They were billion-dollar advertisements for the Medici brand, carved in marble and painted in gold. Leonardo da Vinci was another artist connected to the Medici circle, though few people realize it. His notebooks, his inventions, his scientific discoveries, all funded by Medici gold. When Leonardo designed flying machines and war engines, he wasn't just being creative. He was developing military technology for his Medici patrons. They paired aesthetics with strategy. Lavish spectacles that staged Medici myths, medals that fixed their faces in bronze, and public works that tied gratitude to their name. The family's cultural manipulation went even deeper. They funded universities, libraries, and schools across Europe, but with one condition. Every book, every lesson, every idea had to reinforce the Medici worldview. They weren't just patrons of learning, they were controlling what people learned. Cosimo de' Medici established the Platonic Academy in Florence, where Europe's greatest minds gathered to discuss philosophy and science. But here's the twist. Every scholar was on the Medici payroll. Every idea that emerged from those discussions served Medici interests. The family even influenced the early printing press revolution. When Gutenberg's invention spread across Europe, the Medici were among the first to understand its power. They funded printing houses that produced books glorifying their achievements, while suppressing works that criticized their methods. Even libraries played their part. Collections acquired with banking profits became carefully curated temples of Medici-approved knowledge, where the past was sifted to legitimize the Medici present. By the 1500s, the Medici had achieved something unprecedented. They had rewritten European culture itself. Art, literature, science, philosophy, everything bore their fingerprints. The Renaissance wasn't humanity's greatest awakening. It was the Medici family's masterpiece of manipulation. The bloodline that entered royal thrones. The Medici family's ultimate masterstroke wasn't financial, it was biological. Through a series of strategic marriages that would make modern political dynasties jealous, they bred their way into Europe's most powerful royal houses, especially in France. Marriage for the Medici was policy, dowries as weapons, godparenthood as diplomacy, christenings as summits. It began with Catherine de' Medici, a 14-year-old girl who seemed an unlikely candidate to change history. In 1533, she married Prince Henry of France in what appeared to be a minor alliance, but the Medici were never minor players. When Henry became King Henry II, Catherine became queen. But she wasn't content to be a ceremonial wife. Using the skills learned from her Medici uncles, she turned the French court into her personal chessboard, manipulating nobles, clergy, and ambassadors with ruthless precision. Catherine gave birth to 10 children, 3 of whom became kings of France: Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. Therefore, nearly 3 decades, she was the true power behind the throne. Foreign policy, religious wars, even the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, all bore her Medici fingerprints. But Catherine was only the beginning. The family forged marriages and alliances across Europe, into France, Spain, England, and the Habsburg Empire. Marie de' Medici, Catherine's distant relative from the Tuscan branch, married King Henry IV of France and became the mother of Louis XIII. Her descendants ruled France until the Revolution, making the Medici the secret maternal line of the Bourbon dynasty. As queen and later regent, Marie turned Paris into a second Florence, importing Florentine advisors, commissioning grand architecture, and using patronage as a weapon to secure her son's throne. The Medici's genetic infiltration created something unprecedented, a shadow network of bloodlines that guided Europe's most powerful courts. When kings decided on war, trade, or faith, they often followed advice whispered by Medici relatives who shared their blood. Money bought culture, culture bought legitimacy, and legitimacy opened palace doors no army could breach. By the 17th century, the Medici had done the impossible, transformed from Italian bankers into the hidden royal family of Europe, controlling thrones from Paris to Madrid through a web of marriages, money, and blood that no empire could crush. And their most dangerous power wasn't wealth, art, or lineage. It was invisibility. They had mastered the art of ruling from the shadows, making entire civilizations move to their rhythm while remaining unseen. The Medici didn't just control Europe's money, culture, and politics. They became its invisible architects, the unseen dynasty that shaped the modern world. And their blueprint still rules today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.